What is the thing in your life that you keep promising God you'll fix, and yet it keeps showing back up? For me, it wasn't something obvious. It was actually my sense of purpose. I'm wired to want my life to matter, to make an impact, to do something meaningful. And that's not a bad thing, right? But somewhere along the way, what I did became who I was. If my ministry was going well, then I was doing well. If my kids were thriving, then I was thriving. If I was getting praise at work, well, then I felt like I mattered. But what happened when those things didn't go well? Or worse, when they were taken away? Over and over, I fell into the same trap of finding my worth in doing. And no matter how hard I tried to fix it, I just couldn't. Most of us assume that the Christian life is about trying harder, more discipline and more control and more effort. And that works for a little while. You can clean up some of your behaviors, you can build good habits, you can get your life looking pretty good. But it's kind of like this, a peanut M&M. You see, you've got this shell, the part everyone sees, and most of our effort goes into polishing that shell. We want it to look good. We want to feel like we've got it together. But underneath that, there's a whole lot going on. See, inside there's the chocolate, all the sins and wounds and attachments that gunk up our lives. And at the very center, there's the peanut. Now, that's your true self. Not just who you think you are, but who you are in Christ. As Colossians 3:3 says, your life is hidden with Christ in God. And so discipleship isn't about making the shell look better. It's about uncovering what's already true, what God has already placed at the center. Which means this whole thing is less about addition and more about subtraction. Most of us think sin is just what we do wrong. But as you go deeper, you start to see it differently. It's kind of like peeling an onion. It's layer by layer. First you deal with the obvious stuff. Sexual sin, addictions, anger, the things that clearly don't belong. Then you go a layer deeper and you hit the stuff that's maybe a little more acceptable in our world. Things like materialism or bragging or gossip. The things we choose but don't really question. And then deeper still, you begin to see what you don't do. Sins of omission, the ways you avoid love, the ways you ignore people or act from wrong motives. Kind of the shadow parts of your life. And then at the deepest level, you find something else entirely. Attachments. And attachments aren't necessarily bad things. They can be good things that maybe we've leaned on too hard. My life works if my job is stable. I'm okay if my relationships are good. I matter if people respect me. They become the place we go to for life instead of God. And here's where everything clearly changes, because at this deeper level, working harder doesn't work. See, at the surface, our own power and self-control works. You can use discipline and accountability and structure, and those things matter. But as you go deeper, they start to fail. Because now you're not dealing with behavior, you're dealing with internal realities our lives are built upon. And the more you try to fix it, the more you reinforce it. Again, even good things can build up our ego. Take for instance, sacrifice. something we should all do. But Richard Rohr talks about how easily it can get twisted. He says, people do not realize that this gesture largely feeds the ego and one's sense of self much more than anything else. God does not need it. You need it. Sacrifice is unconsciously an attempt to control God, who does much better without our control. You see, even something good like sacrificing for others, the ego can come in and twist. Because the ego's last trick is to try to fix itself. I saw this most clearly in my own life. For the first 30 years of my life, sexual struggle and pornography addiction ruled my life. The more I tried to fight it, the more I focused on it. And the deeper I got pulled in. It was like quicksand. The harder I struggled, the faster I sank. And this is where our faith becomes really hard to understand. Because everything in us says to try harder. But the deeper truth is, that's the problem. This is why the 12 steps of AA has been so powerful. Because it flips the whole thing upside down. You don't start with strength. You start with powerlessness. Step 1 says, we admit we are powerless and that our lives had become unmanageable. Aren't all of our lives unmanageable in some way? And then step 2, we believe a power greater than us can restore us. Step 3, we made a decision to turn our will over to the care of God. And we turn our will over not just once, but over and over and over. John 15:5 says, apart from me, you can do nothing. See, this doesn't mean we just simply throw our hands in the air and give up. There's still all kinds of effort in the spiritual life. As Dallas Willard says, grace is not opposed to effort, but to earning. So there will always be effort in the spiritual journey, but the nature of the effort changes. See, early on, effort looks like self-control. But later on, effort looks more like self-surrender. See, surrender isn't doing nothing. It's doing something deeper. It's staying present, staying open, staying honest before God. It's resting in your true self, the one that's hidden with Christ in God. It's letting go again and again. See, the deeper the wound, the less it is healed by self-control, and the more it is healed by self-surrender. The deeper the wound, the deeper the surrender. And the more it needs the grace of God to come in and heal you with his love. Here's what this has started to look like for me. When I feel that pull to prove myself or to perform or to control, I simply stop and I say, God, I'm doing it again. Not with any kind of shame, just honesty. Instead of trying to fix it, I just stay there with him. And slowly, something shifts. So for you this week, try this one thing. Notice the places where you feel anxious. Notice what you're trying to control. Notice where your peace feels fragile. And when you see it, don't fight it. Just bring it into the presence of God. Instead of asking, how do I fix this? Ask, how do I stay with God in the midst of this? And when the struggle comes, don't run from it. Don't try to crush it, but just pause, breathe, and turn your attention towards him. Eugene Peterson said, Jesus is the descent of God to our lives, just as they are, not the ascent of our lives to God, hoping he might approve when he sees how hard we try. Jesus is the descent of God to our lives. It's in Him we can rest. You don't have to fix yourself. You just have to stay with Him. Now remember that the deeper the wound, the deeper the surrender. So if this is true, if the deepest parts of our lives aren't healed by trying harder, but by surrender, then the real question becomes, what does that actually look like in real life? Not in theory, not in teaching, but in the middle of our fears, our attachments, our everyday moments. If surrender is the way forward, then it's going to take us straight into the places where we don't feel safe, because that's where we're still holding on. That's where the attachments live. And so in the next video, I want to show you what that looks like in my own life. Just a simple check-in from this week of what God has been teaching and challenging me with personally.